The stars of the Kepler Reach burned cold and distant as the human diplomatic vessel Olive Branch dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Ambassador Catherine Chen stood at the observation window of the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. She was a small woman with gray streaks in her black hair, but her eyes held the sharpness of someone who had survived 30 years of galactic politics. 3 Valoran ships on sensors, reported Captain Marcus Webb from his command chair. They're maintaining escort formation as agreed. Chen nodded slowly. Something felt wrong. She had negotiated with dozens of alien species over her career, and she had learned to trust the cold feeling in her stomach. The Valoran hegemony had been too eager for this summit, too accommodating. They had accepted every human proposal for the meeting location and security arrangements without argument. In her experience, when your enemy agreed to everything you wanted, they were planning something you had not thought of. "How long until we reach the summit coordinates?" she asked. 20 minutes, Ambassador." Chen turned to look at the 2 other human ships traveling alongside them. The Sentinel and the Guardian were officially classified as light escorts. They were small vessels, barely larger than the Olive Branch itself. The Valoran diplomats had laughed when they saw the human security detail. 3 ships to protect their ambassador at such an important meeting? Humans were either very trusting or very foolish. Chen knew they were neither. She walked to her private communication terminal and entered a code that only 12 people in all of human space knew. The screen flickered, and the face of Admiral James Torres appeared. He was sitting in a dark room, his features lit only by the glow of multiple displays around him. "Ambassador," he said quietly. "Status? We're approaching the summit point. The Velorans are behaving exactly as we predicted." Torres nodded. His jaw was tight with tension. "The listening posts in the outer system have detected unusual energy signatures. Lots of them, hidden behind the 4th planet's moon." Chen felt the cold in her stomach grow heavier. "How many?" "At least 200 vessels. Possibly more. They're running silent, but they can't hide their reactor signatures completely. 200 warships." The Valoran hegemony had brought an armada to a peace summit. This was not a negotiation. This was an execution. "Avalon status?" Chen asked. "Green across all nodes. Waiting for your authorization." Chen closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about Earth. She thought about the colonies. She thought about the 12 billion humans spread across 24 worlds who were sleeping peacefully tonight, unaware that their ambassador was flying into a trap. "Hold position," she said. "I want to see how they play this." Torres looked like he wanted to argue, but he simply nodded. "Understood. We'll be watching." The connection ended. Chen straightened her uniform and returned to the bridge just as the Olive Branch reached the summit coordinates. The space ahead of them was empty, except for a single Valoran diplomatic station. It was an elegant structure, all curved lines and glowing panels, floating serenely against the backdrop of stars. Chen had to admit that the Velorans had a gift for beauty. Their art, their architecture, their ships, everything they created was pleasing to look at. It made their cruelty even harder to understand. "Ambassador, we're receiving a hail from the station," Webb reported. On screen, the main display flickered, and the face of High Commander Sithrak appeared. He was a Valoran of the warrior caste, tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large eyes that reflected light like a cat's. His uniform was covered in medals and honors, each one representing a battle won or an enemy destroyed. The Valorans had ruled their sector of the galaxy for 12,000 years, and Sithrak was the living symbol of their military might. "Ambassador Chen," he said, his translator rendering his words in smooth, pleasant tones. "Welcome to the Kepler Reach. The hegemony is honored by your presence." "High Commander," Chen replied with a polite nod. "Thank you for arranging this summit. Humanity is eager to discuss a lasting peace between our peoples." Sithrak's thin lips curved into what might have been a smile. "As are we, Ambassador. As are we. Please, dock with the station. We have prepared refreshments and comfortable quarters for your delegation. We appreciate your hospitality. However, I would prefer to remain aboard my vessel until the formal negotiations begin tomorrow. I hope you understand." Something flickered in Sithrak's eyes. Annoyance? Impatience? It was gone before Chen could be certain. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Rest well, Ambassador. Tomorrow will be a day that changes history." The transmission ended. Chen stared at the blank screen for a long moment. "Captain Webb," she said quietly, I want all crew at their stations tonight. No exceptions. Webb raised an eyebrow but did not question the order. Yes, Ambassador. The night passed slowly. Chen did not sleep. She sat in her quarters, reviewing everything humanity knew about the Valoran hegemony. They were an old civilization, ancient by human standards. They had conquered or absorbed every species they had ever encountered. Their philosophy was simple. The strong ruled, and the weak served or died. Humanity was young. Humanity was small. In the eyes of the Velorans, humanity was weak. That was their first mistake. At exactly 6 hours past midnight, ship time, the trap was sprung. Chen was on the bridge when the sensors screamed warnings. All around the olive branch, space itself seemed to tear open as Valoran warships dropped their cloaking fields. They appeared in waves, first dozens, then scores, then hundreds. Within seconds, the 3 human vessels were surrounded by an armada that could have conquered a dozen worlds. 212 contacts, Webb reported, his voice admirably steady. They're charging weapons. The communication display activated without warning. Sithrak's face appeared again, but now there was no pretense of diplomacy in his expression. His eyes gleamed with triumph. Ambassador Chen, he said, the Valoran hegemony has decided that negotiations are unnecessary. Your species has expanded too far, too fast. You have taken worlds that should belong to the elder races. You have spread your chaos and your noise across space that was silent for millennia. Chen said nothing. She simply watched him. You will surrender immediately, Sithrak continued. You will order all human forces to withdraw from the 12 systems you have colonized in the past decade. You will accept hegemony oversight of your remaining territories. If you refuse, we will destroy your vessels and present your corpse to your government as a message. The bridge was silent. Every member of the crew was looking at Chen, waiting for her response. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. High Commander, she said, I need 1 hour to consult with Earth. Surely you can grant me that small courtesy. Sithrak laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. 1 hour? Ambassador, you have 3 ships. I have 200. What do you think will change in 1 hour? Humor me. Sithrak waved a hand dismissively. Very well. 1 hour. But when that hour ends, I expect your complete surrender. Otherwise, the last thing you will see is the fire of Valoran guns. The transmission ended. Webb turned to Chen. Ambassador, what do we do? We can't fight them. We can't run. Our ships aren't fast enough to escape before they close the net. Chen walked to her communication terminal. She entered the code again, and Admiral Torres appeared. You saw? She asked. Everything. The whole network is watching. Chen nodded slowly. She thought about the 50 years humanity had spent preparing for this moment. She thought about the sacrifices, the secrets, the endless vigilance. Humanity had hoped it would never come to this. They had prayed for peace. They had worked for understanding. But they had never been foolish enough to trust in hope alone. Avalon Protocol, she said clearly. Authorization Chen 77 Alpha. Execute. Torres smiled grimly. Executing now. God help us all. Chen ended the transmission and turned to face her crew. Their faces were pale with fear, but they stood at their stations, with the discipline humanity had learned through centuries of hardship. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, in approximately 45 minutes, the Valoran hegemony is going to learn why you should never corner a human. Until then, I suggest you make peace with whatever gods you believe in. She paused. Not because we're going to die, but because a lot of Velorans are about to meet theirs. Across the galaxy, in hidden shipyards and secret bases, in stations disguised as cargo depots and mining platforms, ancient machinery began to wake. Lights flickered on in darkness that had lasted decades. Reactors that had slumbered in cold silence roared back to life. And ships, hundreds upon hundreds of deadly ships, began to move. The Velorans had set a trap for humanity. They had no idea that humanity had been waiting for exactly this moment. 12,000 light-years from the Kepler Reach, in a system that appeared on no official star charts, Admiral James Torres stood in the heart of humanity's greatest secret. The command center was buried deep beneath the surface of an airless moon. It had been built 60 years ago, in the early days of human expansion, when the first generation of explorers realized a terrible truth. The galaxy was not empty, and most of its inhabitants did not welcome newcomers. Around Torres, dozens of officers worked at their stations with focused intensity. Holographic displays showed the positions of hundreds of vessels across dozens of systems. All of them were waking up. All of them were moving. Avalon Protocol is active, reported Commander Sarah Kim, his second in command. All nodes responding. Torres nodded. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. He had trained for this moment his entire career. Every officer in this room had trained for it. They had hoped it would never come, but they had always known it would. "Show me the Kepler Reach," he ordered. The main display shifted to show the diplomatic zone where Ambassador Chen was trapped. The 3 human vessels appeared as small blue dots, surrounded by a cloud of red markers representing the Valoran Armada. 212 warships against 3 diplomatic escorts. The Valorans were probably celebrating already. Torres smiled grimly. Time until first elements arrive? 38 minutes for the advanced scouts. Main fleet in 52 minutes. What about the special delivery? Kim's expression tightened. Prometheus is en route. Arrival in 44 minutes. Torres looked at the display showing the Valoran fleet. They had no idea what was coming. For 50 years, humanity had shown the galaxy a carefully constructed image. They appeared to be a young species, naive and optimistic, focused on trade and exploration rather than war. Their military was small and defensive. Their colonies were lightly protected. It was all a lie. In the early days of expansion, humanity had encountered a species called the Draxathi. They were slavers. They saw humans as nothing more than livestock useful for labor, entertainment, and worse. The Draxathi had attacked the first human colony without warning, killing thousands and taking hundreds more as prisoners. Humanity had fought back. It had taken 7 years and cost millions of lives, but eventually, the Draxathi were defeated. The survivors fled into deep space, never to be seen again, but humanity never forgot. They had learned that the galaxy was a dangerous place, full of ancient powers who viewed younger species as either servants or threats. They had learned that showing strength invited conflict, but showing weakness invited extinction. So they hid their strength. They built their secret fleet in pieces, scattered across 100 hidden facilities. They designed ships that looked like cargo vessels but could transform into weapons of war. They placed monitoring stations throughout their territory, watching for any sign of aggression. And they waited. The Valoran hegemony had finally given them a reason to stop waiting. "Sir," one of the sensor officers called out, "the escort vessels are beginning transformation." Torres turned to watch. In the Kepler Reach, the 3 small ships protecting Ambassador Chen were changing. Their hulls split apart, revealing hidden compartments and weapon systems. The Sentinel and Guardian, which had appeared to be light escorts, unfolded into carrier-class command ships, each one capable of coordinating entire battle groups. The Olive Branch itself transformed into a heavily armored command vessel, its diplomatic sensors replaced by targeting arrays and point defense systems. "How long before the Valorans notice?" Torres asked. "They already have, sir. We're intercepting panicked communications from their fleet." Torres could imagine the scene aboard the Valoran warships. They had expected easy prey. Instead, they were watching their targets grow fangs. "Put me through to Ambassador Chen." The display shifted to show Chen's face. She was still calm, still composed, but Torres could see the fire in her eyes. "Admiral," she said, "I assume the cavalry is on the way. First wave arrives in 36 minutes. Can you hold that long?" Chen glanced at something off-screen. "The Valorans are confused right now. They're trying to figure out what's happening to our ships. I think we can keep them guessing for a while longer." "Good. When the shooting starts, get your ships behind the Sentinel. Her shields are the strongest." "Understood." Chen paused. "James, how many are coming?" Torres looked at the tactical display. Across human space, hundreds of vessels were converging on the Kepler Reach. Scout ships and destroyers led the way, followed by cruisers and battleships. Behind them came the carriers, each one housing dozens of smaller attack craft. And behind them all came the Prometheus. "Enough," Torres said simply. "More than enough." The communication ended. Torres turned his attention back to the main display, watching as humanity's hidden fleet revealed itself to the galaxy. In the Taurus sector, What had appeared to be a civilian cargo station split apart to reveal a fully armed battlecruiser. Its crew had lived there for years, working ordinary jobs, raising families, waiting for the call that had finally come. Within minutes, they were at battle stations, their ship accelerating toward the Kepler Reach. In the Orion Expanse, a mining platform that processed asteroids for valuable minerals powered up hidden engines and weapons. It was not just a platform, it was a mobile fortress, built to defend human interests in the outer colonies. Now it had a new mission. At the edge of human space, a fleet of cargo vessels traveling in convoy suddenly changed course. Their hulls transformed as they flew, shedding their civilian disguises to reveal sleek warships bristling with weapons. The crews had practiced this maneuver 1,000 times in secret drills. Now they performed it for real. Torres watched the numbers climb on his display. 400 ships, 500, 600. Still more were waking up, joining the flood of vessels streaming toward the Kepler Reach. "Sir," Commander Kim said quietly, "Velaran intelligence is going crazy. They're trying to contact their homeworld, but we're jamming their long-range communications." "Good. I want them isolated and confused when our fleet arrives." Torres studied the tactical display. The Valoran armada was still surrounding Chen's vessels, but they had stopped advancing. They were waiting for orders from High Commander Sithrak, and Sithrak was probably trying to figure out what had happened to his easy victory. The truth was simple. Humanity had never been defenseless. They had simply chosen to hide their weapons until they needed them. Torres remembered the day he had been recruited into the Avalon program. He had been a young officer, fresh out of the academy, with dreams of exploration and discovery. His commanding officer had pulled him aside and shown him the truth about human space, the hidden bases, the secret ships, the vast network of defenses that most citizens never knew existed. "We hope we never have to use this," the old admiral had said. "But if we do, we will be ready." Now they were using it, and Torres prayed they were ready enough. "Sir, the Prometheus has cleared the final navigation point. She's accelerating to maximum speed." Torres nodded. The Prometheus was humanity's ultimate weapon, a dreadnought-class warship that had taken 30 years to build in secret. She was larger than anything the Velaran hegemony had ever constructed, and her weapons were designed specifically to counter Velaran shield technology. The Valorans had spent millennia believing they were the most powerful force in the galaxy. In less than an hour, they would learn how wrong they were. 20 minutes until first contact, Kim reported. Torres straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. The next few hours would determine whether humanity survived as a free species or fell under Velaran domination. There was no room for error. "All stations," he announced, his voice carrying across the command center. "This is what we've trained for. This is why we exist. Let's show the galaxy what happens when you threaten human lives." A chorus of acknowledgments filled the room. Torres turned back to the display, watching as humanity's secret fleet closed in on the Valoran armada. High Commander Sithrak had set a trap designed to take human lives. He was about to discover that humans had built an answer to that trap. An answer 50 years in the making, hidden in plain sight across the galaxy. The deadliest ships humanity had ever built were coming, and nothing in the universe was going to stop them. High Commander Sithrak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched his perfect plan fall apart. The sensors showed it clearly. Human ships were arriving from every direction, appearing out of faster-than-light jumps in waves that grew larger with each passing minute. His tactical officers had stopped counting at 400. Then 500. Now the number was somewhere past 700 and still climbing. This was impossible. Human military records showed fewer than 50 warships in their entire fleet. Human colonial databases listed only civilian installations and mining operations throughout their territory. Every piece of intelligence the hegemony had gathered over decades of observation pointed to the same conclusion. Humanity was weak, poorly defended, and ripe for conquest. The intelligence had been lies. All of it. "High Commander," his tactical officer called out, fear creeping into his voice. "We're detecting additional contacts entering the system. Massive energy signature. Sir, it's bigger than anything in our fleet." Sithrak turned to the main display. A new marker had appeared among the human vessels, a single ship that dwarfed the others around it. Its outline was strange, angular, nothing like the graceful curves of Velaran design. It looked like it had been built for one purpose only: destruction. Identify that vessel, Sithrak commanded. We have no records matching its configuration. It doesn't exist in any of our databases. Because the humans had kept it hidden, Sithrak realized. Just like they had hidden everything else. The communication system activated. A human face appeared on the display, a man with dark skin and gray eyes that held no warmth. He wore the uniform of a military officer, with rank insignia Sithrak did not recognize. High Commander Sithrak, the human said. I am Captain David Reyes, of the UNSC Prometheus. I am assuming command of human forces in this sector. Sithrak forced his voice to remain steady. Captain Reyes, I see humanity has chosen to respond to our invitation with aggression. You surrounded our ambassador with 200 warships and demanded surrender. That's not an invitation. That's an act of war. Reyes paused. I'm offering you one chance to avoid the consequences. Withdraw your fleet. Return to Valoran space. We will release your ships without damage. For a moment, Sithrak considered it. His tactical displays showed the terrible truth. The human fleet now numbered over 800 vessels and was still growing. Many of them were small and fast, clearly designed for close-range combat. Others were heavy cruisers and battleships with weapons arrays that made his own ships look underarmed. And then there was the Prometheus, that monster of a ship hanging in space like a judgment waiting to fall. But Sithrak was a warrior of the hegemony. His family had served with honor for 3,000 years. He had never retreated from a battle, and he would not start now. You are bluffing, he declared. Your ships are untested. Your crews are inexperienced. The Valoran hegemony has ruled these stars for 12 millennia. We do not flee from young species who have barely learned to walk among the stars. Reyes's expression did not change. Very well. Remember that I gave you a choice. The transmission ended. Sithrak turned to his officers. All ships, attack formation. Concentrate fire on their flagship. Cut off the head, and the body will die. 200 Valoran warships surged forward. Their weapons charged, ready to unleash the firepower that had conquered 100 worlds over the course of history. The human fleet moved to meet them. What happened next would be recorded in the histories of a dozen species. Scholars would study it for centuries. Survivors would have nightmares about it for the rest of their lives. The human ships fought like nothing the Valerans had ever encountered. They moved in perfect coordination. Not as individual vessels, but as a single organism with hundreds of parts. Small attack ships darted through the Valoran formation, drawing fire and disrupting targeting systems. Cruisers advanced in precise lines, their weapons synchronized to strike the same points on enemy shields simultaneously. And their weapons were devastating. The first Valoran destroyer exploded less than 3 minutes into the battle. Its shields, which should have been able to withstand hours of bombardment, collapsed under a concentrated barrage from human cruisers. The energy beams were tuned to a specific frequency, one that cut through Valoran defensive technology like a blade through paper. Sithrak watched in horror as ship after ship in his fleet suffered the same fate. The humans had studied Valoran technology. They had analyzed it, found its weaknesses, and designed weapons specifically to exploit them. 50 years, he realized. They had been preparing for this battle for 50 years. High Commander, we've lost contact with the Bright Star and the Eternal Flame, his communications officer reported. The Victory's Dawn is requesting permission to withdraw. They've lost main engines. Permission denied. All ships maintain attack formation, but the formation was already breaking apart. Valoran captains, faced with weapons they could not counter and tactics they could not predict, were beginning to panic. Some tried to fight their way through to the human flagship. Others attempted to retreat to a safe distance. A few simply drifted, their crews too shocked to respond. The Prometheus finally entered the battle. The human dreadnought advanced slowly, almost casually, through the chaos of the engagement. Its weapons spoke with thunder, each shot powerful enough to cripple a Valoran cruiser in a single blow. Point defense systems swept the space around it clean, destroying torpedoes and missiles before they could come close. A squadron of Valoran heavy cruisers concentrated their fire on the Prometheus, pouring everything they had into its shields. The shields flickered, wavered, and held. The Prometheus turned its main batteries toward the attacking cruisers. When the light faded, only debris remained. Ambassador Chen watched the battle from the transformed bridge of the Olive Branch. Her ship had moved behind the Sentinel as Admiral Torres had instructed, protected by the escort's powerful shields. Through the tactical display, she could see the human fleet systematically dismantling the Valoran armada. It was terrible, and it was necessary. "Ambassador," Captain Webb said quietly, "the Valorans are breaking. Their formation is collapsing." Chen nodded. She felt no joy at the victory unfolding before her. These were living beings dying in the void, sons and daughters, brothers and sisters. They had been sent to murder her and her crew, but they were still creatures with lives and families. "How many have we lost?" she asked. 17 ships destroyed, 42 damaged. Estimated casualties around 800. 800 human lives. The Valorans had probably lost 10 times that number already, and the battle was not over. "Signal Captain Reyes," Chen said. "Ask him if he can disable rather than destroy. I want to give Sithrak another chance to surrender." Webb relayed the message. A moment later, Reyes's face appeared on the display. "Ambassador, with respect, they tried to murder you. I know, but there's been enough death today. If we can end this without more killing, we should try." Reyes was silent for a long moment. Behind him, Chen could see the bridge of the Prometheus crew members working at their stations with focused efficiency, managing the most powerful warship humanity had ever built. "All right," Reyes said finally. "I'll try." The human fleet changed tactics. Instead of destroying Valoran ships, they began targeting engines and weapons systems. It was harder, requiring more precise shots and better coordination. But the human crews rose to the challenge. Valoran ships drifted dead in space, disabled but intact. Their crews were alive, watching through their viewports as human vessels swept past them toward the remaining functional ships. Within an hour, it was over. The Valoran armada that had come to execute Ambassador Chen was broken. More than 60 ships had been destroyed, their crews lost to the vacuum. Another 100 were disabled, floating helplessly among the debris. The remaining 50 had either surrendered or fled into faster-than-light travel. The Eternal Dominion hung motionless at the center of the destruction. Its engines were gone, its weapons silent. Emergency lighting flickered through holes in its hull. On its bridge, High Commander Sithrak sat in his command chair and stared at the tactical display showing human ships surrounding his crippled vessel. He had brought 200 warships to kill one ambassador. The humans had brought 800 warships to save her. And now, against everything he had ever believed about the universe, Sithrak was at their mercy. The communication system crackled to life. "High Commander," Captain Reyes said. "I'm coming aboard. I think we should talk." Sithrak closed his eyes. In 12,000 years, no Valoran commander had ever surrendered to a younger species. The shame would follow his family for generations, but his crew was alive. His officers were alive. If surrender meant they would stay that way, then surrender was his duty. "I will receive you," he said quietly. He did not know it yet, but that simple acceptance would change the course of galactic history. The shuttle carrying Captain David Reyes crossed the distance between the Prometheus and the crippled Eternal Dominion in silence. Through the viewport, Reyes could see the debris field left by the battle: twisted metal, frozen gases, and darker shapes that he tried not to think about too carefully. War was never clean. Even a victory left scars. He brought only 4 guards with him, a gesture that his security chief had called insane. The Eternal Dominion still had hundreds of crew members aboard, any one of whom might decide that killing the human captain would salvage some measure of honor from their defeat. But Reyes understood something about the Valorans that most humans did not. They were warriors, yes, but they were also creatures of honor. They had rules about how battles should be fought and how enemies should be treated. Now that the fighting was over, those rules would protect him better than any number of guards. The shuttle docked with the Valoran flagship through an emergency airlock. The interior of the ship was dim, lit only by emergency power. The air was cold and smelled of smoke and fear. A group of Valoran officers waited at the airlock. They wore formal uniforms despite the chaos around them, their postures stiff with wounded pride. One of them stepped forward. "Captain Reyes, I am Sub-Commander Thrill. The High Commander is waiting for you on the bridge." Reyes nodded. "Lead the way." They walked through corridors that showed the damage of battle: cracked panels, scattered debris, dark stains on the walls that Reyes did not examine closely. Velaran crew members watched them pass with expressions ranging from hatred to curiosity to something that might have been grudging respect. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion was a ruin. Half the stations were dark, destroyed by the weapons fire that had disabled the ship. Bodies had been removed, but the deck was still marked with evidence of casualties. High Commander Sithrak stood at the center of the destruction, his uniform torn and stained with blood that might or might not have been his own. He turned as Reyes entered, and for a long moment the two commanders simply looked at each other. "Captain Reyes," Sithrak said finally, "you fight well." "Thank you, High Commander. So did your people." Sithrak's expression flickered with something like surprise. He had expected arrogance from the victor, not respect for the defeated. "Why are you here?" he asked. "You have won. You could destroy what remains of my fleet, kill my crews, and claim this sector for humanity. Instead, you disabled our ships and came to talk. Why?" Reyes moved to stand beside one of the destroyed stations. He looked out through the damaged viewport at the field of debris and disabled vessels floating in the darkness. 53 years ago, he said quietly, humanity encountered a species called the Draxathi. They were slavers. They saw us as nothing but animals to be captured and used. They attacked our first colony without warning, killed thousands of people, and took hundreds more as prisoners. Sithrak listened in silence. We fought them for 7 years. We lost millions of lives. Entire colonies were destroyed. By the end, we had become something we barely recognized: killers, destroyers, creatures of war, instead of exploration. Reyes paused. When it was over, we swore 2 things. First, that we would never be caught helpless again, and second, that we would never become what the Draxathi were. "I do not understand," Sithrak said. "You built a secret fleet capable of destroying the hegemony's forces. You hid your strength for decades. How is that different from what we did today?" Reyes turned to face him. "You came here to murder an ambassador and conquer our worlds. We came here to protect our people and stop your attack. The weapons may be similar, but the purpose is everything." Sithrak was quiet for a long moment. In 12,000 years of Valoran history, no elder species had ever shown mercy to a younger one. The strong conquered the weak. That was the natural order of the universe. It was the law that had guided the hegemony since its founding. And yet here stood a human captain, surrounded by enemies, offering something that Sithrak had never considered possible. "What do you want from us?" Sithrak asked. "I want you to go home." Sithrak blinked. "What?" "Go home. Tell your government what happened here. Tell them that humanity does not want war, but we will not accept conquest. Tell them that we are willing to talk real talks, not traps disguised as diplomacy." "You would simply let us leave? After we tried to murder your ambassador?" "Yes." Sithrak shook his head slowly. "You are either very foolish or very wise. I cannot tell which. Maybe both," Reyes admitted. "But I know this much. Killing you and your crews won't make humanity safer. It will just convince your government that we're a threat that needs to be eliminated at any cost. If we let you go, maybe, just maybe, some of your people will start to wonder if there's another way." The bridge was silent except for the hum of emergency systems. Velaran officers watched the exchange with expressions of confusion and disbelief. Everything they had been taught about younger species, about the nature of power and conquest, was being challenged by this one human standing calmly amid the ruins of their flagship. "There is something else," Sithrak said slowly. "Something you are not telling me." Reyes smiled slightly. "You're perceptive." "Yes. There's something else." He pulled a small device from his pocket and activated it. A holographic image appeared in the air between them, a star map showing human territory and the surrounding sectors. "This is what your intelligence services think human space looks like," Reyes said. The map showed a modest region of colonized worlds, lightly defended and easily contained. He touched a control, and the map changed. Human territory expanded dramatically, spreading across sectors that Velaran intelligence had believed were empty or unclaimed. Hundreds of new installations appeared: shipyards, defensive platforms, monitoring stations. "This is what human space actually looks like." Sithrak stared at the map. The implications were staggering. The fleet that had defeated him today was just a fraction of humanity's true military strength. If the hegemony had succeeded in conquering human space, they would have triggered a war they could not possibly win. "Why show me this?" Sithrak asked. Why reveal your secrets to an enemy? Because you're not going to be our enemy, Reyes said. At least, I hope you're not. You're going to go home and tell your government that attacking humanity would be suicide. You're going to recommend that they accept our offer of genuine negotiations. And you're going to do it because you're a smart commander who cares about his people. Sithrak studied the human's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. He found none. Reyes was telling the truth, or at least what he believed to be the truth. And if my government does not listen? Sithrak asked. If they decide to send a larger fleet, then we'll defeat that fleet too. And the one after that. We'll keep defeating your fleets until your government runs out of ships or decides that peace is better than extinction. Reyes deactivated the hologram. But I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. I'm hoping that you, High Commander, will help us find another way. For a long moment, Sithrak said nothing. He thought about his crew, still alive because the humans had chosen to disable rather than destroy. He thought about the battle, and how easily the human fleet had dismantled his forces. He thought about 12,000 years of Valoran history, and wondered if perhaps that history had taught his people the wrong lessons. I will deliver your message, he said finally. I will tell my government what I have seen, but I make no promises about how they will respond. Reyes nodded. That's all I ask. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. High Commander, one more thing. 50 years ago, we could have announced our secret fleet to the galaxy. We could have used it to carve out an empire, to conquer and dominate just like every other elder species. We chose not to. We hid our strength because we wanted peace, not power. Sithrak met his eyes. And now? Now everyone knows what we can do. But our goals haven't changed. We still want peace. We're just no longer willing to be murdered for it. Reyes and his guards departed. Sithrak watched them go, then turned to look out at the debris field where so many of his people had died. He had come to the Kepler Reach to destroy humanity. Instead, humanity had destroyed everything he thought he knew about the universe, and somehow, impossibly, they had let him live to think about it. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler Reach. Ambassador Catherine Chen stood at the observation window of humanity's newest space station, watching ships from a dozen species pass through the traffic lanes below. The station was called Unity Point, and it had been built in neutral territory as a symbol of the new era dawning across the galaxy. Behind her, the main conference chamber was filling with delegates. Valoran diplomats in their formal robes sat beside human representatives in military uniforms. Members of the Sindari Collective, a species of traders who had watched the battle with great interest, occupied the seats near the windows. Even a delegation from the reclusive Quarn had sent observers, curious about the species that had defeated an elder civilization and then offered them friendship. The galaxy was changing. Chen could feel it in every conversation, every negotiation, every cautious handshake between former enemies. The door opened behind her, and she turned to see Captain David Reyes enter. He wore formal dress instead of his battle uniform now, medals gleaming on his chest. Beside him walked High Commander Sithrak. 6 months ago, they had faced each other across a battlefield. Today, they worked together to prevent the next war. Ambassador, Reyes said with a slight bow. The Valoran delegation is ready to present their proposal. Chen nodded. Thank you, Captain. High Commander. It's good to see you again. Sithrak's expression was complex. The past 6 months had been difficult for him. Returning to Valoran space with news of the defeat had nearly cost him his life. Some in the Hegemony Council had called for his execution as a traitor who had surrendered to an inferior species, but others had listened to his report. They had studied the data from the battle, seen the true extent of human military power, and realized that the old ways of conquest and domination were no longer sustainable. A faction began to form around Sithrak Valorans, who believed that their civilization needed to change or face extinction. It had not been easy. There had been political fights, assassination attempts, and several tense moments when war seemed ready to break out despite everyone's efforts. But slowly, painfully, progress had been made. Ambassador Chen, Sithrak said formally, the Valoran hegemony thanks you for your patience during these negotiations. We recognize that after what we attempted at Kepler Reach, we have no right to ask for understanding, yet you gave it anyway. Chen smiled slightly. We've all made mistakes, High Commander. What matters is what we do next. They entered the conference chamber together. The delegates fell silent as the three of them took their places at the central table. Holographic displays activated, showing the proposed treaty that had taken months to negotiate. It was not a surrender document or a declaration of submission. It was something far more revolutionary, a genuine alliance between humanity and the Valoran hegemony. The terms were simple but profound. The Valorans would open their borders to human trade and exploration. Humanity would share certain defensive technologies with Valoran scientists. Both species would work together to establish protocols for first contact with newly discovered civilizations, ensuring that younger species would no longer face the choice between submission and war. Most importantly, both sides pledged to defend each other against external threats. The galaxy was vast and largely unexplored. There were dangers out there that neither species could face alone. Sithrak activated his communication device and began to speak. His words were broadcast not just to the delegates in the chamber, but to listening stations across Valoran space. For 12,000 years, the hegemony believed that the only way to survive was to dominate. We conquered or destroyed every species we encountered, convinced that any sign of weakness would lead to our own destruction. The events at Kepler Reach proved that this philosophy was flawed. He paused, looking at the human delegates seated across from him. Humanity showed us another way. They built a fleet capable of destroying us, yet chose to spare our lives. They won a total victory, yet demanded nothing but peace. They had every reason to hate us, yet offered friendship instead. The chamber was utterly silent. Even the alien observers seemed captivated by the Valoran commander's words. Today, I speak not as the enemy of humanity, but as their ally. I speak for those in the hegemony who believe that our civilization must evolve or perish, and I speak to the galaxy itself. To all the species watching this moment, Sithrak stood and turned to face Captain Reyes. The Valoran hegemony offers its hand in friendship to the human species. We pledge to stand beside them against any threat. We pledge to learn from their example of strength tempered by mercy. And we pledge to build a future where conquest is replaced by cooperation. Reyes stood and clasped Sithrak's hand. The image was broadcast across the galaxy, a human and a Valoran, former enemies, now allies. Ambassador Chen watched the moment with a mixture of pride and relief. So much had been risked to reach this point. So many lives had been lost. But something new was being born, something that might eventually transform the entire galaxy. After the ceremony, Chen found herself standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find both Reyes and Sithrak approaching. "Ambassador," Reyes said, "a moment of your time?" "Of course." The three of them stood together in silence for a while, watching ships pass through the station's traffic control zone. A Valoran cruiser flew alongside a human frigate, their crews visible through observation ports, watching each other with curiosity instead of fear. "6 months ago, I came to Kepler Reach to kill you," Sithrak said quietly. "Today, I stand beside you as a friend. I still do not fully understand how this happened." Chen smiled. "Neither do I, High Commander. But I've learned that the universe rarely gives us the outcomes we expect. My people are calling this the Great Turning," Sithrak continued. "They say that the Battle of Kepler Reach marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. They may be right." Reyes nodded slowly. "The other species are watching us closely. Some of them are scared they've seen what human ships can do. Others are hopeful. They think that if the Valorans can change, maybe other elder civilizations can too." "And what do you think, Captain?" Chen asked. Reyes considered the question for a long moment. "I think that humanity spent 50 years preparing for a war we hoped would never come. Now we need to spend the next 50 years building a peace that will last forever. It won't be easy. There will be setbacks and disappointments. Some Valorans will never accept the alliance. Some humans will never trust them." He looked at Sithrak. "But I also think that what we're doing here, what the three of us are doing, matters. Not just for our species, but for everyone out there who's watching and wondering if there's a better way." Sithrak inclined his head. "My people have a saying, the stars remember those who change them. I believe that history will remember this moment." Chen turned back to the viewport. Somewhere out there, beyond the busy traffic lanes and the watching stations, the galaxy stretched on forever. Countless species lived among those distant stars, each with their own hopes and fears, their own struggles and dreams. Humanity had wanted nothing more than to explore that galaxy in peace. Instead, they had been forced to build a secret fleet, to prepare for a war they never wanted, to transform themselves into warriors while hoping they would never have to fight. And when the fight finally came, they had won not just the battle, but something far more important. They had proven that strength and mercy could exist together. They had shown that defeating an enemy was not the same as destroying them. Now a new era was beginning. The deadly ships that humanity had unleashed were returning to their hidden bases, but the galaxy knew they existed. And somehow, that knowledge was not a threat, it was a promise. A promise that humanity would defend the innocent, protect the weak, and stand against any power that tried to rule through fear and conquest. Chen closed her eyes and let herself feel hope for the first time in months. The battle at Kepler Reach had been intended to take human lives. Instead, it had given birth to a new future, and that future was just beginning.